the dishonesty that has existed is that we somehow led people to believe that.
Também ninguém fala da intervenção da senhora
definido em linhas gerais no contacto que Trump fez, que o Presidente Trump fez com os seus congêneres, tanto ucraniano como russo, em que, digamos, começou por uma primeira fase, ou por um primeiro acordo que, diga-se de passagem, pelos vistos não surtiu grande efeito, que era um acordo de não ataque a infraestruturas energéticas, porque logo a seguir ao contacto que Trump fez com o Presidente Zelensky, houve um ataque à infraestrutura de bombagem de gás em Suja, como sabemos, e que viabiliza esta infraestrutura para os próximos 2 anos e meio. Quer dizer que por aquele pipeline, que era o principal que abastecia a Hungria e a Eslováquia, durante 2 anos e meio, portanto não será impossível chegar qualquer fornecimento de gás, nem, mesmo que no dia 20 de abril, como pretendem os Estados Unidos, se concretize efetivamente um cessar-fogo que possa depois levar a um entendimento de uma paz entre as duas partes e que possa depois eventualmente reatar-se ou reiniciar-se o fornecimento de gás. Mas, digamos, podemos olhar para este roadmap que os americanos estabeleceram, uma primeira fase, um entendimento de não ataque às infraestruturas energéticas, uma segunda de uma paz no Mar Negro. Portanto, de não obstaculizar ou não dificultar a navegação, nomeadamente para os portos ucranianos de Odessa, para os portos de Danúbio, etc., e para os portos russos na outra margem, no Mar de Azov e na outra margem do Mar Negro. Portanto, é isso que está a ser discutido neste momento. Era efetivamente, até em certa medida, aquilo que inicialmente o plano europeu falava, uma paz no ar e uma paz no mar. Não é bem uma paz no ar, a primeira é uma paz das infraestruturas energéticas, como dissemos, a segunda seria, portanto, haver um acordo neste sentido. E depois será uma terceira ronda para a definição da tal cessar-fogo total de 30 dias para um acordo de cessar-fogo. Portanto, é isto que se perspectiva. Quais são as expectativas? Creio que veio já Peskov dizer que a linha, o horizonte que os Estados Unidos estabeleceram no dia 20 de abril lhes parece demasiado ambicioso, porque há muita coisa a definir em termos de pormenor, em termos de detalhe, e porque estamos num momento decisivo e alguns observadores, alguns analistas até referem que as batalhas decisivas são a ser tratadas agora para pôr pressão sobre os negociadores. Portanto, vê-se tanto da parte ucraniana como da parte russa um recrudescer ou um aumentar da tensão e dos combates em toda a linha da frente. Portanto, é um sinal de boa vontade, é certamente um sinal, digamos, de esperança, mas talvez em termos concretos seja algo ainda no plano das intenções e das boas vontades. O que vemos nesta realidade, ou neste momento, é que há uma agenda completamente distinta e até em certa medida, não digo em conflito ou em choque, mas, digamos, não funcionam em sintonia a agenda europeia e a agenda americana. Aliás, são diferentes e são, em certa medida, até contraditórias. E isso faz com que ambas as partes não manifestem real vontade de chegar a um acordo de paz. Porque quando os russos têm a expectativa que os norte-americanos lhes permitam atingir os seus objetivos, nomeadamente quando ouvimos anteontem, aliás, na entrevista que Witkoff deu a Tucker Carlson, referindo que há 5 oblastes que falam russo e que efetivamente são russos, etc. Portanto, há o beneplácito de que os 4 oblastes e mais a Crimeia, os 4 oblastes, portanto, Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia e Kherson, mais a Crimeia, portanto, é um dado adquirido, ficaram para a Rússia, e que são linhas vermelhas, nomeadamente os primeiros 4, são linhas vermelhas para a Ucrânia. Portanto, isso faz extremar as posições. E quando a Europa diz que ainda a perspectiva de um cessar-fogo não é o melhor cenário, nomeadamente as declarações do chefe do diretor das informações alemã, que não é propriamente um país de segunda linha, quando o diretor das informações alemãs diz que o ideal para a Europa era que esta guerra se prolongasse mais 5 anos, que em 2030 a Europa estaria em condições de derrotar a Rússia. Portanto, isto é um incentivo motivo para que o presidente Zelensky não negocie nos termos que os Estados Unidos querem e que naturalmente a Rússia também pretende. O que faz com que tanto uma parte como outra alinhem nesta coreografia, e o que estamos a assistir efetivamente é decorrer estas negociações que depois em resultados práticos são zero, por conta veio a senhora porta-voz a porta-voz do Ministério dos Negócios Estrangeiros dizer que a Rússia ia responder em género, isto é, proporcionalmente ao ataque ucraniano, digamos, à central de pressão de gás em Suja. O que quer dizer que no terreno a guerra continua, aliás, subiu de intensidade, mantêm-se estas negociações fundamentalmente para manter uma agenda. Os Estados Unidos, isto agora é uma interpretação pessoal, estão a colocar sobre a mesa o seu peso negocial e a dar a oportunidade às partes para se entenderem, mas em última instância, se a Europa continuar nesta posição, não vemos da parte europeia nenhuma intenção de mudar o sistema. Nomeadamente vemos as declarações de Keir Starmer, dizia este é o momento certo para pormos os pontos nos is, permita-me nomeadamente para substituirmos os americanos, etc. Vemos o presidente Zelensky numa coreografia interessante, atender um telefone quando está a falar com os jornalistas e tratar Macron por Manuel, dizer, Manuel, espera aí 20 minutos que eu estou aqui a falar com os jornalistas, como se fosse já um amigo da família. Portanto, a Europa não está em sintonia com os Estados Unidos, e quando a Europa não está em sintonia com os Estados Unidos, que tem sido o principal garante da segurança na Europa nos últimos 80 anos, quer dizer que a situação de paz na Europa dificilmente será atingida e muito provavelmente, portanto, isto não passarão de boas intenções, mas que não levarão a Porto Seguro.
Well, first of all, I think the largest issue in that conflict are these so-called four regions: Donbas,
Yes.
Crimeia, the names
Lugansk,
Lugansk, and there's two others. They're Russian-speaking.
Yep.
There have been referendums where the overwhelming majority of the people have indicated that they want to be under Russian rule.
Yes.
I think that's the key issue in the conflict. So that's the first thing. That when that gets settled, and we're having very, very positive conversations.
And Russia controls that. In fact, some of those territories are now, from the Russian perspective, part of Russia.
Correct. That's correct. But this has always been the issue,
right?
And it's sort of no one wants to talk about it. That's the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is there are constitutional issues within Ukraine as to what they can concede to with regard to giving up territory. The Russians are de facto in control of these territories. Can Zelensky survive politically if he acknowledges this? This is the central issue in the conflict. Absolutely that. On NATO, I think that Zelensky and he's got a right-hand guy, Yermak, I think that they've largely conceded that they are not going to be a member of NATO. Accepted that Ukraine, and Russia, if there's going to be a peace deal, Ukraine cannot be a member of NATO. I think that's largely accepted. A great relationship with Vladimir Putin in his first term. So I think Vladimir Putin knew that it was going to be hard for the president at this time to come over to Russia. I think they're going to meet in the coming months. But I think it was enormously gracious for him to accept me, and I need to acknowledge that. By the way, how would we settle a conflict with a guy with someone who is the head of a major nuclear power?
Yeah.
Unless we establish trust and good feelings with one another. I don't know how you would do such a thing. And President Putin said to me in the first meeting I had, he said, Steve, do you know that I didn't talk to Joe Biden for 3.5 years?
It's craziness.
How would you resolve that? Tucker, can you imagine me and you having a conflict? Before the first meeting with President Putin, when President Trump said to me, go over and have that conversation. I think we're going to have a good, healthy conversation. Before that conversation, there was no talk about a Black Sea moratorium. There was no conversation about an energy infrastructure moratorium on hits, between the two countries. We were not talking about prisoner exchanges and all kinds of other stuff. After one meeting, and I am saying to you, not because of me, because this was President Trump sending a signal to President Putin that he wanted to resume his relationship together and that they were going to be two great leaders figuring out this conflict. That was the message. That was me coming there. That was my message to President Putin. I was directed by President Trump to deliver that message, that we were here to begin a real discussion, a productive discussion about how to end this conflict. And President Putin, to his credit, sent all kinds of signals back to the president that this is the path that he wanted to be on, including statements that he made. In the second visit that I had, it got personal. The President Putin had commissioned a beautiful portrait of President Trump from the leading Russian artist, and actually gave it to me and asked me to take it home to President Trump, which I brought home and delivered to him. It's been reported in the paper, but it was such a moment, and told me a story, Tucker, about how when the president was shot, he went to his local church and met with his priest and prayed for the president, not because he was the president of he could become the president of the United States, but because he had a friendship with him and he was praying for his friend. Simple, a media that, they all march together. I mean, I told you the story. I give interviews about President Trump, and guess what? All the nice things I have to say about him because I believe in that sort of gets excised out of the, out of my interviews. Not with you.
Zelensky, the question of Zelensky. I think there are good things to say about Zelensky. I think he's got a kind of bravery, which I admire. I think the Ukrainian military is legit brave, doomed, because they're just fighting a much bigger country. He's
Right.
not going to win. But I think they've behaved with valiance. But the Russian position is he's not elected, and so we can't sign any kind of treaty with him. Do you think there will be elections in Ukraine?
Yes.
You do.
So without getting into names,
Yeah.
I've talked to multiple European leaders, and I've said to them, the more you encourage him not to be proactive at the peace table, the more you suggest that aid will continue without any conditions attached to it. No one says that we shouldn't aid Ukraine today or in the reconstruction later on, but it's got to come with certain conditions. If we're going to give a lot of money to Ukraine, we want to hear the business plan of how this is going to get resolved, because it's an unsustainable business plan if they don't have a plan for how it gets resolved. We just can't forever give money because they'll get ground down. And ultimately, and this is, we've discussed this in the administration, ultimately, what you can't have here is risk of any kind of nuclear action, even a tactical nuclear action. I mean, even if it's not a big bomb explosion,
Doesn't matter.
Just a tactical nuke would take stock markets down all over the world.
Well, they haven't been used in 80 years. They've been used exactly twice in human history.
You can't allow it to happen.
It's not a precedent you want at all.
And while I think we have to get a fair deal for Ukraine, we cannot allow that country to drag us into World War III. And that's not my policy. That's President Trump's policy.
Then what is, if I can just say, what the hell is going on with European? Keir Starmer saying we're going to send British troops. Their entire military is smaller than the U.S. Marine Corps. The country is dying economically. All those countries are dying economically. What are they thinking? What is that? Is that a posture? Is it a pose?
Well, I think it's a combination of a posture and a pose, and a combination of also being simplistic. I think there's this, this sort of notion of we've all got to be like Winston Churchill. The
Yeah.
Russians are going to march across Europe. I think that's preposterous, by the way. We have something called NATO that we did not have in World War II.
Do you think the Russians want to march across Europe?
100% not. I think
Right. I mean, why would they want that? I wouldn't want those countries. Why would they?
First of all, why would they want to absorb Ukraine? For what purpose?
Exactly.
They don't need to absorb Ukraine. That would be like occupying Gaza. Why do the Israelis really want to occupy Gaza for the rest of their lives? They don't. They want stability there. They don't want to deal with that. But the Russians also have what they want. They've reclaimed these 5 regions. They have Crimea, and they've gotten what they want. So why do they need more? He said, Putin's a very smart guy. Who doesn't want to have a world where Russia and the United States are doing collaboratively good things together?
Exactly.
Thinking about how to integrate their energy policies in the Arctic.
Exactly.
Share sea lanes. Maybe send LNG gas into Europe together. Maybe collaborate on AI together if we can get past, technology migration. Who doesn't want to see a world like that? What about the presidents being able to talk to one another about Iran, where Russia has some degree of influence? I mean, who doesn't want to see a world like that? To me, it's so logical. Well, look at the progress that we've made in Russia. We've made tremendous progress. It's nothing short of enormous. How in the world is that Putin looking to manipulate people like me or other people who may be negotiating with him? That's Putin actually reaching across the table and saying to President Trump, I'm prepared to do these things. And now the president is accepting that, and he's saying, let me tell you what I'm prepared to do. And he's prepared to bring Zelensky into the conversation. And he talks to Macron, and he talks to Starmer, and he talks to the Norwegians and the Finnish. I think none of these people have been talking together before. Can you imagine a war that's been going on for 3.5 years? No one was talking? This is what went on.
It's insane.